Hi and welcome to another podcast with your host. This is Miriam Khan at Raise Your Vibes. Today's podcast is all about red flags and why we perhaps don't spot red flags. What are red flags? Why don't we look for green flags? And how people can hopefully be less judgmental. This is a hard one, folks. This is a real hard one. The red flags term has sort of grown over the years. Definitely, I would say, over the last 10 years or so. And, we use it sort of like freely. We use it sort of in a nonchalant way to explain certain things that are not healthy either in our friendships or relationships, in our parent situation, whatever the predicament might be. But it's becoming more and more frequent to use this term. And these are, a red flag, obviously, as you're aware, if you're on the beach, if you are somewhere, is classed as a warning sign, But nowadays, that term is coined to mean unhealthy boundaries, unhealthy relationships. And often, sometimes we're in these predicaments and we don't realise that we've missed several red flags. We've missed several key things. Some are very, very obvious, when we have toxic conversations, toxic members, whether it's a family member, it's a close unit, a friend. Some of those red flags, such as early signs of narcissistic behaviour or aggression, victimization, being abusive or manipulative, lying, deception. These are just a range of some red flags that we see. But when we're in personal relationships, such as friendship, it could be a long-term partnership. It could be a partnership we're in for life. We don't sometimes see the red flags. Sometimes we see them much, much later on. And our friends might be pulling some of these red flags out and showing them to us, and sometimes we can be blind to them. Now, I'm going to look at why that often happens. If we're in a situation where that partner is abusive to us, have manipulated us, our confidence is gone, our self-esteem is gone, maybe we feel like the term stuck in a rut, we feel like we can't get out, maybe we're financially dependent on that person, maybe we are reliant on them for whatever reason, and sometimes we don't want to rock the boat of identifying or triggering ourselves and saying this is a red flag, because sometimes we're in that predicament. We don't want to accept what is reality, what is truth, and we're stuck in it. We don't know how to get out of it. And it's almost like a spider's web. The more we've gone in, the more it becomes more difficult to get out of. And it's very, very difficult to see that, I've had people saying to me when I've tried to help another individual or support another individual, or even personal about me and my life experiences, well, you should have seen it. You should have got out. You're to blame. You're to blame. You're to blame. And yes, of course, when we're in that situation and we've stayed in a toxic environment for way too longer than we should have, yes, I need to take accountability for my actions or the person's actions, correct? But judgmental aspects of people pointing the finger does not help in any way, yeah? We are in a vulnerable state when we've been in a situation where there's that person with the toxic traits. We don't often see it. A lot of it also comes from our childhood. If we've been in an environment where love, L-O-V-E, love, from a parent is nothing but shouting at you, screaming at you, being rude, expecting certain demands, expecting you to be selfless, not self-love, to be the one that puts everyone else first before everyone else. Maybe these situations of breadcrumbing to us is aspects of love. When we're chasing, when we are going after something that clearly this other person doesn't want us, they're just using us. These are breadcrumbs, but we don't register that this is a red flag because this to us has become a normal part of our life, Some red flags are very, very clear, are very obvious. Some are, you can see it clear as day. Sometimes we'll notice it depending on our personality and our character. And often, sometimes we ignore it, So I'm just going to go through some of the red flags that are very, very well known. And perhaps for some people, we don't actually are aware or we're not aware that it is a red flag, There's been situations where, for example, you might have someone with very, very controlling behaviour, and this can be either male or female. They're wanting to know your every movement. They're wanting to know where you're going, who you're with, what time you'll be back. They might want proof that you're there. They might track you down. They might actually come to, say, for example, you're out with friends. They might come to the restaurant to check that you're there. They're calling up the restaurant to check that you're there. They might have a list of approved friends that you can actually spend time with, or you can't. And it's that controlling. It depends on the person, that you are with. Sometimes you have to compromise, and sometimes, they don't like you with, for example, the opposite sex. So if it's a female gathering, that might be fine, but they might not like a particular female in that group. Maybe that female is very outspoken, very liberal. They don't want you being influenced and having your own thoughts, your own mind. Okay? If it's a mixed group of male friends, for example, they may not want you with that group because they might see that person as a threat. They're jealous. And they see that potentially you could be lost to this pack of guys, which isn't always the case. We can have friendships with different people, but this is where it has very, very much, blurred lines, okay? And sometimes it can be where nowadays you've got so much social media, they're controlling things. They want to see your password. They want your password. They want to see who you've got on your social media. They might ask you to delete people, block people, and it could be a close friend you've known for a long, long, long time. And these things are what I'm talking about, These are the things where it's clearly a red flag to a majority of us. Sometimes we do it for appeasement because we think, okay, just to shut that person up, I'm going to be quiet. And sometimes we don't, okay? Moving on, you might have, clearly from what I've just said, a lack of trust, a lack of respect. Those boundaries are very blurred. The boundaries between the trust between that healthy relationship, or what you think is a healthy relationship and it isn't, is very, very unstable, right? And your friends, your colleagues, your family members, they will also point that out to you. And sometimes in these situations, whether we mean to do it or not, we isolate ourselves because that relationship requires us to thrive. And that partner will undoubtedly make us choose. And sadly, 9 times out of 10, we end up cutting our family members and friends off, right? And ironically, that's what this person wants. They want us to have nobody supporting us. They want us to be isolated. They want us to have no one around us that we can go and tell our troubles to, because now they've got us where they want us, okay? That emotional support is meant to support you and to comfort you and to be like a pillow of comfort, especially in very, very difficult times. And this individual, like I said, whoever you're with, they've done it on purpose so that you can't go complaining and whinging, because when you do, people will flag up to you, hold on a minute, this isn't right, this isn't correct. How you're being treated is bang out of order. It shouldn't be happening like that, Later on, some people may, unfortunately, feel physical abuse, mental abuse, emotional abuse. Physical abuse, as we know, can come in any shape, form, direction. And it is very, very tragic. And a lot of people don't report it. They suffer in silence. And that, I used to think, was a sign of weakness many, many, many years ago. Not from a judgmental point of view, but only when you go through something like that yourself and you realise, actually, it takes a lot of strength for that person to remain silent. Because that pain eats away at you eventually. The trauma eats away at you eventually. And holding on to it and having lots and lots of mental health issues is not something for the faint-hearted. The emotional abuse is on another level. Bruises, as bad as they are on a physical level, a lot of times people will not go report the physical abuse, by the way. They will suffer a lot of horrible, horrible things. But the emotional abuse, when someone is having a tirade of verbal abuse in your face, belittling you, putting you down, maybe you've bought a gift, maybe you've done something out of kindness, and they're constantly putting you down, constantly belittling the things that you've tried to do. And that is knocking your self-esteem, and it's knocking your self-confidence, and it's knocking who you are as a whole. That red flag then turns into something even worse. The mental abuse then starts, and a lot of people, like I said, will stay in that particular predicament and rut because the mental abuse becomes normality. because it's something they are used to, they are accustomed to it. They don't know anything different until they've stepped into a loving, caring relationship, and then they're triggered again because they keep expecting something else to occur. And these aspects of the red flags, understandably, later can cause, a lot of trauma. Yeah. And it's the mental abuse and it's the emotional abuse, it's the verbal that is far more damaging because it's done on a daily basis, and it's there to belittle, it's there to basically make us a scapegoat for this person's issues that they have themselves. We're a punching bag. We're a verbal punching bag, we're a physical punching bag. This person that we're with has clearly huge issues, and this can occur. There may be some individuals that have clearly some substance abuse. They're addicted to certain drugs, they're addicted to certain patterns, it may be certain substances. It could even be medication for mental health, diagnosis. Some medication can be quite addictive. It has side effects as well. And obviously, when we're dealing with issues like that person can turn either mellow and chill, or they can be very, very, abusive and self-destructive towards us furthermore. And that is a whole different level, of abuse in itself. I've touched upon the next one in one of my other podcasts, but I'll do it briefly here. Narcissistic behaviour is a red flag, a clear red flag. And sometimes what's worse is, the covert narcissist, the one that takes their time to feed your ego, to feed you in a sense of, I'm safe, I'm someone that you could rely on, I'm someone that you should be happy with in a relationship, partnership, marriage. I treat you well, I take you out, I give you all the things in front of society, that you are after in a relationship, but behind closed doors, it's a completely different ball game. This person clearly has delusions of grandeur. They are able to very easily manipulate you and other people around you. They have ways of acting, and it is acting because in front of a person, they'll behave in one particular way, and then in front of you, it's totally different. So don't be fooled by that, because that does occur, okay? And narcissists, especially covert narcissists, will do things where they think the whole world basically drops around them, and it's not. They're driven by their ego. They've got a lack of self-confidence, but they are driven by their ego, and their trauma that they leave us with is on a whole nother level. It can be very, very exhausting, traumatizing, recovering for something like that. And believe me, you end up purging as well for a long, long time. You don't realize that you've inhibited and allowed lots and lots of patterns of behavior to become normal to you whilst you're in that relationship. Sometimes you've kept quiet, sometimes you've kept silent, because fighting back, verbally, or saying no. When I say fighting back, I don't mean throwing punches, but you are trying to exist. And sometimes keeping your mouth shut might be an easier solution than actually voicing your concerns. But unfortunately, it causes more issues to us as well. Some other red flags. You might have this individual having huge, huge anger issues. And I mean huge anger issues. Things being thrown, tantrums, unpredictable tantrums, almost like a child having a meltdown in a supermarket, and people are staring at you and glaring at you and thinking, what the hell is this? These individuals don't have emotional regulation, and they've also then warped ours as well. Ours gets triggered because we don't really know anymore what we're doing, and we're sort of walking on eggshells all the time because of this particular predicament. And, we should be feeling with a partner that we can tackle difficult subjects in a safe zone, in a safe place where we can talk with ease and comfort. And even if it's not a nice conversation that we're going to have, it's said respectfully and it's answered respectfully. It's said respectfully. The person will see where you're coming from because they understand you're laying your cards bare on the table and saying, look, I'm not happy here and things need to change. That's another aspect. There's also codependency. Now, If that individual with a red flag has made sure that you're away from friends, family, close ones, even work colleagues, then it gets very, very difficult because you're then codependent on them. Now, financially, if they've got you in a situation where they're keeping you at home, for example, and saying, oh, yeah, I want you to be home and look after you, or things can reverse later on where you're the breadwinner and they're reliant on you and you have to be at their beck and call. There's the emotional blackmail that they use to try and coerce you to do what they want. Not what you want, but what they want. And again, this is not an easy thing to salvage or to recover from because these patterns get worse. These patterns get severely worse to the point where you can't say no, you struggle to say no, and even voicing your discernment, whole another kind of fish, shall we say, right? We try to avoid this conflict, by the way. That's another thing. In the red flag, we know that it's not acceptable what this person's doing, but we don't want to tread on that eggshells where that person's going to explode in our face. And we don't know what their behaviour is going to be like. It's extremely unpredictable. They've not resolved their issues. We've not resolved ours. Our self-esteem and our confidence just goes further and further down. We don't like the predicament we're in. We clearly are not happy with the predicament we're in, but it keeps escalating and it keeps escalating and it keeps escalating to the point where we are just so tired, and we have a resentment towards this person. We don't want to resolve things. We want to walk away. We want to leave. Sometimes we just can't. We're just stuck in that spider's web, Jealousy is another one, which I've mentioned earlier. And jealousy can feed, a hungry bear. And jealousy is one of those things where they will manipulate feelings. And it's not necessarily jealous that someone is going to have you. It's jealous that someone else is going to have that energy supply of you. And that's what drives them nuts. This leads to gaslighting. Gaslighting is that manipulative tactic that people use. And it's another very clear red flag. Again, it's something we don't see because it can come very, very slowly. And it can be linked to that verbal abuse I talked about and the emotional abuse that I talked about, because these types of people will manipulate and they'll take advantage and they will try their best to belittle us all the time. They will make us question our decisions. They will make sure that we're manipulated to whether we're thinking we're sane or not. These things obviously are not acceptable, but it continues. A lot of these people will also not take any accountability for these things. They won't communicate with us clearly. They won't let us have that connection with friends and loved ones because their love bombing that they've been doing, which is another red flag, is something that, we don't see, because sometimes the love bombing could be simple things like sending us flowers, appreciating little things that other people have totally ignored in our life. They might have taken us out for dinners or romantic getaways or whatever the situation is, but it's actually not what it seems. Behind the closed doors, it's a completely different situation, to the reality that it is. And I can think of one situation where I know a friend of mine was on honeymoon, for example, with someone in this particular predicament. And during the honeymoon, it was literally the first day of the honeymoon. And, all the way through that relationship, they'd been love bombing, various other things. And whilst they were on honeymoon, the wife was walking, the husband was in front, the wife was walking in a very hot resort and had sandals on. And a thick glass broke and a chunk of it landed on her foot and cut her toes, sliced the toes. She was given immediate first aid. The husband walked 10 steps ahead and had seen what happened, but chose to ignore it and walked away. And it took quite a lot of people to come and find him and say, hey, your wife, is in pain. She's having first aid. She might need stitches. It was that bad. And the guy was sort of nonchalant, what's it got to do with me? It's got nothing to do with me. When he eventually came back, helped the wife begrudgingly to go back to the hotel room, to the honeymoon suite. Then off he went to go and have food and drinks at the bar and entertained himself for several hours. And not one message, not one care. The wife was obviously beside herself, thinking, what is this? And was thinking, oh, well, I don't want to spoil his holiday. That was the mentality. I don't want to spoil his holiday. I don't want to ruin his time. He's going to get angry. And that's because she was conditioned to think that not caring about herself was acceptable. Throughout that relationship, prior to the marriage, it was a different ball game, And then obviously he showed his true colours once they'd got married, big time. So how do we get out of these situations? How do we spot them? Sometimes we don't. We really don't. But things we need are honesty, being humble, being strong in the sense of knowing that, that this situation is not what I need. It's resilience that I need. Self-care. And these are quite hard as well when all the time these situations have made us think less about ourselves because we have that selflessness. We need self-loveness, and it's very, very difficult. You have to try and sit back and think about the needs that you've got, your own acknowledgement of your own self-needs. Do I deserve this? No, I don't. Do I need better? Yes, I do. Can I do better for myself? Yes. Will being out of the relationship serve me and my family better? Yes. If you're answering these particular questions, you need to come out of it, And it's very, very difficult because these situations are not easy to get out of. They're very toxic. Like I said, if you're financially reliable on that person, it's very difficult to get out. We need communication. We need to not be overly emotional. Definitely we need professional help, which is not always easy because not everybody can afford it. And it's hard when they've cut us off from our friends and loved ones to be able to talk with someone. If you're lucky, very lucky, there may be someone that can support you and can help you. Maybe on the sly, someone is still in contact with you and helping you, but that's not always the case. Later on in life or later in that relationship, we can try and set boundaries. These are also not easy to do, but it's our right. And the boundaries help us to assert ourselves. It helps us for that confidence. It helps us to say, hey, this is not acceptable with me. If you're lucky, you might be able to reconnect with your friends and family, like I said. You might be able to come back. You might be able to know when it's the right time to leave. But it's very, very difficult. Some people have, like a 3-month rule, like, this isn't working for me, I'm out. Well, how do you get out when you're married? Do you know what I mean? So sometimes we don't know that situation, and it's very difficult to deal with the conflict that comes from those red flags in that relationship. It's very, very hard to leave those types of relationship because we've become accustomed to it being love, and it's not. When we've been in a situation where it's very, very toxic, we're not aware that we're in a toxic majority, relationship, and it's one-sided. We're not aware that we're being manipulated and controlled, love bombed, used. Our energy is basically so exhaustive. We don't know that. And we'll have people saying, well, you're dumb. You could spot this. Well, you stayed there. You'll have people saying, unfortunately, very, very hurtful things. But nobody understands till you're inside that predicament. Because these people are smart. These people are well-tuned and know exactly how to play you like a game of chess. And they've got you cornered many, many times. Many times. And it's very, very hard to be defensive in that relationship and come out of it easily, because these individuals will devaluate us. These individuals will, underestimate your relationship, and they will not necessarily see what needs fixing or healing. They will want to argue over it because they don't see the point of repair. They're not in it for the long-term goals. They're in it to get what they can, And sometimes when you keep running to a family member or friend, they'll get to the point where they're tired of hearing it because you're not doing something productive about it. You're not leaving, for example. You're not getting out. And they don't consider the fact that there's all sorts of different aspects to this. It's not an easy thing to get out of. When you've got someone being sarcastic all the time, ridiculing you, name-calling you, not just the physical side, even scoffing, just simple things, belittling you. They can't apologize. They don't change their behavior. It's very, very hard for us to get out. Very hard to get out. Sometimes you can do something called, stonewalling your partner. This is where, you just stop interacting. You might not even nod your head. You might just go, I'm not even going to interact anymore. It's almost like you just shut down completely and you're not there. And this is also a response to the trauma we're in, this response to the issues we're in, because we just can't cope with the overwhelming of abandonment and feelings and basically the chaos that's, been around us big time. So these behaviors take a long time for us to adjust, and what we can do without realizing it is listen to our body. Your brain's going to be telling you certain things. Your body definitely does. Sometimes we ignore that fight or flight patterns. We ignore what's clearly in front of us, where we're dehydrated, we're dysregulated, we are losing sleep, we're not well, our hair's falling out, our skin looks awful, maybe we've aged, we can't speak about our concerns, we just can't eat or stomach anything. We need therapy. And we need help to get out of this situation, because you keep trying to think that, I'll fix it, I'll tolerate it. You can't fix something like that. There's no healing to that. The healing comes to you. Yeah, this other person, you can't fix them. They're broken. That sounds rude, but they're broken. They're going to keep continuing this with either you or anyone else they meet. They're in a broken pattern, and they're going to keep doing it. And if it's not you, it's someone else. So you have to try and leave. You have to try and look after yourself. You have to try to get out of it. And if some of the things I've said in this podcast are things that you're starting to recognize, somewhere privately, jot them down. Somewhere privately, look back at yourself. Take ownership. Seek help. Seek support. In ways, sometimes in many, many places there's a Citizens Advice Bureau. There are some counsellors that will do some work for free. There's also local churches, priests in whichever faith that will be willing to counsel you and listen to you as well. There's community centres, there's people within circles. You might be able to have a good friend, maybe somewhere, that even though you've cut them off, they're willing to take you back because they understand the predicament that you're in. And when we don't, recognize these red flags, like I said, it has a real knock-on effect for us. And it does say a lot about us, and it does say a lot about our, own analogy, where we don't understand the reality of what's in front of us. It's not just denial, it's because of things that have happened to us, that your cognitive dissonance basically allows you to ignore various things that are clearly there. And our hormones take an impact. The bias takes an impact. The past patterns of our past relationships have an impact, whether that's friendships or parents. It's got a long-term effect. And we have to try and come to the reality that this is not the right relationship for us, and we need to exit. And exiting isn't easy. And that will be another podcast for another time. But first is recognizing what these flags are and helping someone. If you know someone that's come up to you and said, this is what's happening to me, help. Just listening is the best thing you can do. Don't scream, don't shout, don't do the blame game, but try to be supportive and just listen. Sometimes that person just needs to listen. Even if they keep going back and back and back and licking their wounds, it doesn't matter. The fact is you've listened and you've tried to offer support, and that's all sometimes that person needs for when they're ready to actually leave and exit. And believe me, when they exit, they will exit and they will not look back. And that person they're in a relationship with them will keep trying to get them back, believe me, because the source of that energy is too good. They've knocked them to the ground, as we say, and they want them there. They're going to keep wanting them there. But people like that rise. Phoenix rise from the ashes. And it's just a matter of time. I want to send a lot of big hugs to anyone going through that. And I want to send love, and I want to send blessings, and I want to say to you, you're not on your own. And it takes a long time and a lot of healing and a lot of purging and a lot of changing your own ways, being by yourself, being in recovery mode, around a supportive network to understand you deserve better. And it starts with you. Self-love starts with you. Stop accepting breadcrumbs, stop accepting bare minimum, and start loving you first. And break these patterns that you've become entrenched with, because we all deserve a happy life. Love and blessings. Thanks for tuning in. This has been Miriam Khan at Raise Your Vibes.